Welcome to this week's episode. My name is Vinitha Bonnie, and I am a motivational keynote speaker with expertise in change and leadership. It's not just about adapting to change, it's not just being agile in the face of change. It's how can we actively lead change in the workplaces, in our teams, and in our own lives as well. And today's episode is all about procrastination. In my work with corporate organizations, it has always been from the perspective and the angle of what is the root cause? What is that driver that is causing that behavior or that phenomenon in our organization that we wish to change? Because we wish to change the outcome, we've got to identify the root cause. And if we identify the root cause, then we can change the drivers to lead to different outcomes. If we want different outcomes in our organizations, in our businesses, in our cultures, in our teams, and in our own lives, we've got to change the driver that is causing that behavior and therefore that outcome that is currently being experienced. So for me, that's very much how I live my life. What is that driver? What is that thing that is causing that behavior that I wish to change? And one of those behaviors that I've been working on for many years has been procrastination. Now, for those that have worked with me and those that have been a client or a friend or a colleague will think, Winifred, what the hell are you talking about? Because you work a lot. And there is this perception that I work 70, 80 hours a week. And yes, there have been times in my life where I have worked 70, 80 hours a week and sometimes for weeks on end. And that is because I've had a deadline. That is because I've had things to do, or I don't know. But generally, I have this thing with procrastination, and one behavior that I have been really focused on changing the last couple of years, as it's taken that long, that I procrastinate on is waking up on time. And I've tried all the hacks. I've tried all the strategies to wake up on time. I've done all the work because all the content that is out there, all the thought leadership that is out there, all the expertise and procrastination that is out there talks about how we need to change our external environment. If we change our external environment and manipulate the external, that's kind of what set us up for success. We're less likely to procrastinate. We're more likely to engage in the behavior. We're more likely to do that thing. And I believe that as well. I mean, organizational cultures. I'm not an organizational psychologist, and I have spent hours and hours and weeks and years studying organizational psychology. And I've always said to clients and individuals that if we want to change the behavior, don't try and change the individual, change the system that governs the behavior. And two things can be true at the same time. And so for me, in terms of procrastination, what I uncovered is that it's not always about the system. It's actually about the deep internal. Now, like from an organizational perspective, this might be a little bit more difficult to implement if we're looking at widespread or whole of organizational change or culture change. This may be difficult because particularly if you've got a team of 20,000 people, we fundamentally can't control people. People have got to decide to change. And that's probably a whole entire different podcast and how we actually do that. At an individual level, even at a small nuclear team level, what we know is that it's not always the system that creates that change in behavior. It's something so much more deeper and personal. So for me, I have tried all the external things. I've had multiple people call me in the morning for me to prompt me to wake up, only for me to pick up the phone or even answer the phone in bed and then go straight back into bed or go back to sleep. I've left my phone in the bathroom or left it in the furthest area of my house, my apartment, which is actually quite tiny now. Only for me to like press snooze and be like, I'm tired, blah, 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 and like go back to sleep. And I've had all the logical sounding reasons, like I'm tired, I'm exhausted, my body needs sleep, I went to bed late. And yes, of course I went to bed late. I think they call it like revenge bedtime procrastination or something like that. Of course I went to bed late because that was a perfect excuse for me to sleep in the next morning. Um, so I've spent hours and hours and years researching procrastination, trying to get all the data on what is that root cause for me because I've done all the external things. I've done all the things at a system level and it's not working. And I've done it multiple times and I've done it for like months and months and years and years. I've given it a solid go. It's not working. Changing the system, setting up my environment for success is not changing the behavior. I'm either a stubborn bitch or I'm there's something a lot more deeper. And one day it clicked. I realized that it wasn't the resistance. I realized that it wasn't fear of failure or fear of success. I realized that it wasn't me avoiding the emotion that comes with the discomfort of doing the thing. And I also knew that it wasn't undiagnosed ADHD. I realized that procrastination is a way that I torment myself, not self-criticize, torment. And over time, as I've gone deeper into my healing and self-awareness, into my trauma, I realized that these behaviors that stem from these traumas have become more sophisticated and more sneaky over time. Compared to when I had a mental breakdown over 10 years ago, these behaviors, like my things that stem from my trauma, they're not so obvious. They're not so conscious and right in my face as they were before. And by sophisticated, what I mean is actually unconscious. They operate at a very unconscious level. And so I'm a very self-aware person. I've been hyper self-aware since the age of like 5 years of age. Like I can remember my earliest memories of like just being very hyper, very self-aware of what was going on in me um and just the way that I processed information and things like that. And when you're self-aware, when you've read all the books, when you've learned all the neuroscience and you know all the science behind human behaviors and what drives human behaviors and things like that, what I realize is that I actually need someone to bounce things off. I need an external person to help pluck out and pull from the unconscious into the conscious. What's driving that? What's at the core of that? What is that root cause? I realized that I needed to do as a motivational keynote speaker and as someone that designs and delivers training programs and experiences to cultivate more seamless transitions through change, whether that be change in one's culture, organizational change, or change in how our leaders show up. What I realized is that I needed to do what my clients do, which is bring an external in. So my clients will bring me as an external in to speak as a motivational keynote speaker on change and leadership to ignite that fire within that people, to back themselves, show up, take bold action to create sustainable results that are actually create impactful results. My words are getting mixed up because I'm actually having a sugar crash right now. Just letting you know. Just letting you know. Letting you know. I'm getting my words mixed up. And so that's what I realized. I realized that I needed to do what my clients do, which is bring an external in. And I have done work with psychologists and psychotherapists and shaman healers and blah blah blah. I've worked with so many different people, and they've all been hugely helpful. And there's one person in my life that I have who is what I call a spiritual mentor. And one day we we're having a conversation, and she said to me, "Oh, you just love to torment yourself." And then it clicked. In that moment, it clicked. We weren't even talking about how I procrastinate in the morning and hit the snooze button. It clicked. And I realized, bloody hell, that's why I procrastinate. Because every time I sleep in, every time I don't do the thing, I get to self-criticize. I get to dive headfirst into shame. I have a reason to suffer. I have a reason to like, it's beyond self-criticism. It is literally what she said. It is tormenting myself. Tormenting myself as I become a better human, as I've done things in the world and become a better human being, I've had less reasons to be ashamed of myself, less reasons to beat myself up. And I think this is true for anyone that's experienced conditional love, anyone that experienced shame or trauma in their life, like that deep pain and angst in your life, or were constantly criticized, that feeling, that emotion, that level of emotional pain that is embedded in our nervous system. Gay Hendricks calls this the upper limit. It's our emotional baseline. In inclusion work, DEI work, or JEDI work, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion work, it's what we call internalized oppression. In psychology, we call it learned helplessness. That is where really these are things that are deeply, deeply embedded in our nervous system, and they're defaults. They're defaults. If there's nothing that's happening in my world that is drama filled and causing me to feel that experience of angst and shame and guilt and fear and resentment in my life, I will create a situation. I will press the snooze button. I will not do the thing, and therefore then have a reason to torment myself and therefore feel that emotion. So our unconscious mind works in incredibly sophisticated ways, particularly if you have a person like myself who has spent years and years and thousands and thousands of gazillions of dollars and tried so many different things. Will know that our trauma works in very sophisticated, sneaky ways to keep us in the discomfort that it knows, because what is uncomfortable is comfortable to our nervous system. It is familiar, and what it sees as familiar, it sees as comfortable. What it sees as comfortable, it sees as safe, even though it's not safe, even though it's not comfortable. And I talk about this more in my book, Back Yourself. Get out of your own way and take your spot in the world. This is how one of the many, many ways that we consistently get in our own way is defaulting to these emotional baselines. So now that we know what the baselines are, now what can we do? Well, one of the things that I really have done, and a friend actually came over for lunch and we were talking about this, is somatic. So the nervous system it's physical. It runs, it connects, particularly the vagus nerve, it runs in the brain through the body. And what has really, really helped is not just talk therapy, is engaging in somatic therapy. If you'd like to know more about that, then send me an email at hello@winifred.com and we can have a chat about that. So these are some of the many, many ways that we consistently get in our own way, and we may not always be obvious to us and very clear to us. And if we just keep doing random things when all we're doing is just slapping a band-aid solution. One of the most powerful things that we can do is to work with someone external and bring them into our organization, bring them in as a coach, bring them in as a keynote speaker. All of those things is what I do for my clients. I'm a motivational keynote speaker. I design and deliver change and leadership training programs. I am an executive coach, specifically for leaders, senior leaders, and executive managers. We need to be doing those things for ourselves. That is working with someone externally. And as an organization, at an organizational level as well, us trying to figure these things out on our own as a people and culture team, or as an inclusion team, or as a sustainability team, or as an innovation team, or as a CEO or C-suite team, whatever team it is, us trying to identify what those root causes is not always going to be the most effective thing. Pay the money, get the external in, you will get double the impact, double the results in literally half the amount of time. Halved the amount of time, because we're just too close to it. There's too much proximity. So don't just slap a band-aid, because if we try and solve it ourselves, we're just going to slap a band-aid on it. And particularly if we're in a resource constrained environment, one of the most valuable things that we can do is take that money, spend it on external, bring them in, get them to do a keynote, get them to do a training program, get them to run a diagnostic in your organization, bring them in, and they will give them responsibility of identifying that root cause and then edit that to create a different behavior to get you different results. If you want different results, if you want different outcomes, you've got to change the behavior. In order to change the behavior, we need to understand what is driving the behavior. What is that root cause? It's not just at an individual level, it's also at a team level, it's at an organizational culture level, it is at an industry level, it is at all levels. We need to understand what is the root cause. So, my intention today to share that with you today is to share my own personal journey in identifying the root cause of what was driving my procrastination. Now that I know what the root cause, I don't need to put my phone in the furthest part of the apartment. I need somatic therapy. That's what I need. I need somatic therapy. I don't need, because I now realize this is a trauma response, right? This is a trauma response. This is my brain and my body knowing that this kind of level of torment and pain and suffering is really familiar, and just creating scenarios, situations for me to relive that and feel that on a regular level. So now that I know that, I can now take different behaviors to create a different outcomes. So the intention with this video, with this podcast, is take what serves you and throw out the rest. You are an expert in your own life. You're an expert in your own organization. I think the biggest takeaway from today is work with someone who's external, who doesn't have that close proximity. Work with someone that is external, and you will get double the results in half the time with double the results in half the time. Yeah. You'll just get results so much more quicker. I cannot emphasize that more enough. I have worked with so many different clients over the time. I've worked with so many teams. I have given, so many different keynotes. And when I've shared those keynotes, I've sat down with clients to identify what is the root cause, and then we've framed the keynote to where the root cause is at that, to name it and then say, okay, from here, what can we do differently? Get an external in. I cannot emphasize that enough. It is absolutely worth the time and the money and the resources, 100%. My clients do that with me, and I do that for myself. I do that with my business. I do that with my own personal development. I do that with my own spiritual development. It's not outsourcing the work. What it means is that I have that sounding board, and I have someone that is external that doesn't have that proximity, but is able to see things so much more clearer. And we just get to the outcome so much more quicker as well. We get there in double the time, rather than me just trying to sit there and figure it out on my own. Help that helps and serves you. Take the parts that serve you, throw out the rest. And if you would like me to come in and speak to your organization to deliver a keynote at your next event, your leadership retreat, or your team gathering, or whatever event or experience that you have, if you would like advice on change and leadership and how to do it from the perspective of understanding and diagnosing the root cause to change the behavior to then change the outcome, send me an email at hello@winitha.com. I'd love to have a chat.